Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are, perhaps good morning. Welcome to our final session of the first day of Getting Real. Before we get started with this session, I just wanted to offer a special word of thanks for our sponsor for this session, who is also a longtime IDA partner and supporter, and that is the Department of Cultural Affairs of the City of Los Angeles. Thank you so much to DCA. And now I'm going to hand it over to Brenda Coughlin, the moderator for this session.
Maggie, and I'm sure everybody who has been part of Getting Real today is so incredibly amazed at the job that the organizers have done and what they have all brought us today. So thank you to IDA and the Getting Real organizers. My name is Brenda Coughlin. I'm with the Sundance Institute. And as we finish out this first day of Getting Real together, if you want to just take a few breaths, take a moment, get some water, whatever you need. We have an hour together and we'll be here until 5 p.m. Pacific. I want to thank our accessibility resources today include our ASL interpreters and captioning. And so we do have captions. If you have any issues with those, holler and let us know, and our team will intervene as we need to. I go by she, her pronouns, and I'm joining you from the occupied lands of the Canarsie and Lenape people in Brooklyn, New York. I'm a white woman with short hair, white short hair. I'm wearing a pink shirt, and I'm sitting in a room with plants, a window, and artwork behind me. It's my absolute pleasure and honor to moderate this session, and I'd love to have the group who's joining us come in and introduce themselves. Can we start with Rodney Evans? Rodney, if you are here, come on and please. Hello, Rodney.
Hello, Brenda. How are you?
I'm great. Introduce yourself.
My name's Rodney Evans, and I'm the director of Vision Portraits, and I go by he, him pronouns. I'm a black male wearing a black and white plaid t-shirt, coming to you from the land of the Lenape people, also known as Brooklyn. And I've got a bright light in the background that probably shouldn't be on. Oh well. And a white hallway and the edge of an old school Film Forum poster, hoping for the day that Film Forum opens back up real soon.
Thanks, Rodney. Can we have Jim Lebrecht join us? Oh, the screen's getting small. Jim.
Hi, I'm Jim Lebrecht. Him. I live in Oakland, California, which is a lonely land. I've got black glasses on. I'm wearing a kind of a long sleeve shirt that is kind of orangish. I've got unruly long blonde hair and almost a white goatee. I'm in my home office. There's a red wall behind me with a bunch of different music and a particular film's poster that says Crip Camp.
Thanks, Jim. Can we have your director with you, Nicole Noonman, next? Nicole.
Hi, I'm Nicole Noonan. I am a white woman with shoulder-length brownish hair and glasses and a patterned black shirt on, and I'm sitting in front of white closet doors in my house in Oakland, California. I'm really happy to be here with all of you.
Thank you. So our filmmakers and our film team coming. Aaron DeWard, narrator, describer, actor. Come on, join us.
Hi, everyone. I'm Erin DeWard. I use she and her pronouns. I have short, curly, brown hair with some silver streaks. I wear red cat-eye glasses. I am Caucasian, and I don't know if I'm wearing a blue top, but you can't really see it. And I'm sitting against a blank wall with nothing on it. And I'm coming to you from Lenape land in New York.
Thanks, Erin. And our final panelist today, Michelle Spitz.
Hi, I'm Michelle Spitz. My business is Woman of Her Word. I guess I could be she, her. And I have long brown hair and brown eyes. I'm wearing a black top, usually a smile. And I'm sitting in my living room, beige. In the background, decorative. And I'm here in San Francisco.
So thanks so much. Expanding expression. We have a little under 60 minutes together. So let's just dive in. We're going to have 3 parts today to our time together. The first is really going to be what's possible. How can we expand our craft, our creative repertoire, and our audience? What do we mean by expanding expression? We'll see some amazing film footage from Rodney and Jim and Nicole from their work, from their creative work, which is in partnership with Erin and Michelle, part of their creative teams. Second, what's the journey the filmmaker is committing to? What are you committing to as an artist to take part in this expanded expression, in using audio description and other ways of expanding the reach of your audience? And we're really going to hear from the group, but particularly Erin and Michelle, thinking about all the different possibilities that this way of working creatively in this craft brings to us. And then third, we're going to reserve, we really want some discussion here and as much interactivity as we can. So we're really hoping for 20 minutes. There'll be plenty of time to collect questions as we go, and the team from IDA will help us. But that is our great joy, is to actually talk with you. So let's dive in. Rodney,
Yeah.
I really wanted to start with you and the amazing, you brought us 2 clips and to show in comparison. And I'm just going to say here live in the group, they're each 5 minutes, but maybe there's a sort of place that you can play from each of them. We're queued up wherever you want. And so could you tell us a little bit about what we're going to see, and then maybe we can talk about it more from your film, Vision Portraits, award-winning and amazing film. But
Sure.
we're about to see.
Yeah, I mean, I chose a section from Kayla's portrait, and Kayla is an African-American dancer. And the reason I chose this section was because I find dance to be, ephemeral and hard to put into words and hard to just make tangible. And I think it's a testament to Erin's amazing gifts as an audio describer, the ways in which she brings Kayla's dance to life. So, I just chose 5 minutes, and we can start where you see Kayla dancing, but if you want to just play the whole 5 minutes and then play the 5 minutes that's audio described, it's just a vastly different experience, because one has no audio description at all, and you're with Kayla in the room as she's dancing, and it's a moment of breath for the audience, and they're taking in Kayla as she's in rehearsal responding to this piece of music. And then the second version has Erin's audio description, which is very precise, very succinct, and it really captures what's happening on screen. So I think sample number 1 first would be great.
Great. Luckily, we have an amazing team. Jose can play for us. And so we'll start with sample number 1 from Vision Portraits.
Functional seeing vision in one eye. Around 4 or 5, I remember going to the doctor and them saying she needs to wear a patch. I don't remember necessarily the specifics. I just remember having to wear an eye patch over my strongest seeing eye in order to make the other eye stronger, which never happened. When I put the eye patch on, I literally couldn't see anything. So all I did was sleep. And as I was growing up, they're like, well, we need to put you in something to keep you active, to keep you engaged and not worried about the eyesight as an issue. So my parents said, well, let's put Kayla in dance classes. Having more limited vision than other artists, it gives me more access to feeling and sensation. The visual of how I look is less important than what I'm feeling. So dirty. My husband says, what's the point of having glasses if you're gonna keep them so dirty? Oh, wow. So I was born with vision out of my right eye. When I was in college, that's when other conditions started to happen with my seeing eye. We were driving at night and I really couldn't see the street signs. My friend was like, watch out, watch out. She had to reach over and turn the wheel. And she was like, you didn't see that? We were about to run off the road. And I was like, no, I really didn't see it. So I went to my optometrist that I had when I was younger. He told me that I had a disease called iritis, arthritis of the eye. So I took the eye drops that were prescribed to me. And I had to take them for quite some time to get rid of that inflammation. I would say maybe a year had passed and I go to the doctor, and that's when they determined that because of the overuse of the steroids to get rid of the inflammation, it had given me glaucoma.
I was just wondering about some of the challenges as a visually impaired dancer.
Being like on the same counts with other dancers is really hard. If I'm having to use my peripheral, I mean, meaning I don't have anything on my left side. So if you're a dancer on my left side, we're not going to be together. And then the ones that are on my right, unless you're like caddy corner, I need to like turn my head. Spotting, yes, I can, but what good is it really going to do me? When a teacher is like doing moves and it's like spatial and we're moving upside down and in and around, and I'm just like, dude, no. I guess I keep asking myself the questions when I dance, like, why don't pretend? Like, right? Like when you are doing something and you can't actually see them to be in time with them, but who is that for? You know what I mean? Like, who am I pretending for? If that's what I need, that's what I need to give myself. I mean, just theater lighting is challenging. If I have to enter in a blackout, no. Someone needs to take my hand and walk me to where I need to start, which means that there has to be some level of trust. My best dancing is when my eyes are closed. When I was born, I only had
Rodney, okay, so we pause there. So that's the
That's
first.
the first, yeah. And then sample 2 just has Erin's audio description, and it's like I said, it's just a completely different experience, and she's bringing to life this dance that if you are blind or low vision, you're not able to see, right? And so she's bringing that experience to life for you through the audio description as precisely and as emotionally as possible. And so I just think it's a very different experience, and you get to see, you know, the craft of audio description, frankly.
Great. Yeah,
So-
let's see that. Can we play that and then maybe talk about it with you guys after?
Sure.
That'd be great. Okay, thanks, Jose. Go ahead.
I think we're missing audio.
Yeah, I think we're just.
Contained from the elbows up. In that bent position, she moves off to her right.
Having more
Can we back it up so that actually we can actually
it gives
start
me more
where
access
that
to feeling and
Kayla dances on stage. Her torso surges forward, her head whips back, her arms orbit the space at her midsection. The momentum carries her around and her feet slap the floor. She whirls, her right arm extended and leading the way, and dips, her left arm extending and taking its place. She moves to her left in a continuous and undulating spin. Her body folds over at her waist. Her feet move to the music as her body bobs. Her forearms swing, slightly contained from the elbows up. In that bent position, she moves off to her right.
having more limited vision than other artists, it gives me more access to feeling and sensation.
Her body slices the space.
The visual of how I look is less important than what I'm feeling.
Her arms fly back behind her like wings. Next, Kayla holds up her glasses and looks at the lenses.
So dirty. My husband says, "What's the point of having glasses if you're gonna keep them so dirty?" Oh, wow.
Puts them down.
So I was born with vision out of my right eye. When I was in college, that's when other conditions started to happen with my seeing eye.
On stage, bathed in aqua light, Kayla intertwines her fingers.
We were driving at night and I really couldn't see the street signs. My friend was like, "Watch out, watch out." She had to reach over and turn the wheel. And she was like, "You didn't see that? We were about to run off the road." And I was like, "No, I really didn't see it." So I went to my optometrist that I had when I was younger. He told me that I had a disease called iritis, arthritis of the eye. So I took the eye drops that were prescribed to me. And I had to take them for quite some time to get rid of that inflammation. I would say maybe a year had passed, and I go to the doctor, and that's when they determined that because of the overuse of the steroids to get rid of the inflammation, it had given me glaucoma.
Black and white images flash. Eye scan, Kayla on stage, dark patches, Kayla a blur of motion, veins, Kayla, orbs. Now Kayla stands in a theater. She slowly turns her wrists, scoops her arms, bends her knees, and stretches her arms above her head. She bends over at her waist. Now in a rehearsal space, Kayla and another woman bring their arms over their heads as they step and lunge sideways from one foot to another in sync.
I was just wondering about some of the challenges as a visually impaired dancer.
Being like on the same counts with other dancers is really hard. If I'm having to use my peripheral, I mean, meaning I don't have anything on my left side. So if you're a dancer on my left side, we're not going to be together. And then the ones that are on my right, unless you're like catty corner, I need to like turn my head. Spotting, yes, I can, but what good is it really going to do me? When a teacher is like doing moves and it's like spatial and were moving upside down and in and around, and I'm just like, dude, no. I guess I keep asking myself the questions when I dance, like, why don't pretend? Like, right? Like when you are doing something and you can't actually see them to be in time with them, but who is that for?
Thank you. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Rodney. That really showed the range. I think I mean, Aaron, can you come up for a moment before we see some clips from Crip Camp? Can you just say, briefly in the time that we have, when did you and Rodney start collaborating on that?
So after Rodney had made the film, he contacted me, and I have to say, it's rare that you get to actually work with a filmmaker in creating description. And Rodney was wonderful because I wrote a first draft, I sent it to him, he gave me feedback, I fixed, some of the things that we talked about, I sent it back to him. And then when we recorded it, the description, Rodney was in studio with me. And we actually rewrote a couple of things on the fly. And I think one of the pieces we rewrote was when they lunged the side. Rodney, am I right about that?
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah. So, being able to work with the filmmaker so that what their vision for the piece gets translated into the words that you utilize is really important. And it was brilliant working with him.
He is brilliant. We know and love his work, and that is true not only for Sundance Institute, but for many, many around. So many artists. Yeah, you love it. We love your work.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I just wanted to add that it is not the norm, and I think it really should be the norm.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that I have to give props to a disability studies scholar named Georgina Klieg, who teaches at UC Berkeley, who's blind, who did a lecture about audio description and how bad they normally are. And she gave samples of just how bad they were. And I had locked picture and I was entering post sound, and I meekly raised my hand from the back of the room and I was like, do you have any advice for a filmmaker that is about to enter the post sound phase and would like to make an audio description that doesn't suck? And she was like, be present, like be a part of the process. Don't let them take you out of the process. Don't let them wait until the film is picked up and then send it off to some like conveyor belt factory like thing where you have no input. Like bring it into your post sound process.
That may be it, right? Let us not send our films to factories.
Yeah.
There's nothing else we can take from this. It will, be that. I mean, I want to come back to more of that too. I think when we talk a little bit in the second part about the journey, the sort of the journey that you committed to, who so much about this, and also how your work is changing and influencing both of you, right? As actors, audio narrators, really poets. Aaron, it's an emotional poet, and Rodney too. But let us bring the Crip Camp team up. So we'll see, and I would love to see another example of this, and they're going to show us theirs, and we can talk a little bit more about how that works. So
sounds great.
For now, adios, and Crip Camp, come back, come on up here, and we can have everybody even better. Nicole and Jim, the directors of Crip Camp. An amazing film, and I have many things to say about it. But please tell us what you brought today to really bring to light for us expanding expression and audio descriptions in particular. What are we going to see and hear?
So we brought two clips, but the first one I think underscores the necessity of being really involved with your audio description, and that it, and this is something that well, Nicole, you said a number of times that this is a representation of your film. This is a very important part of your film. People are going to hear this, and you don't want to just like Ronnie said, send it off to a factory, and that it's important. So, Nicole, do you want to kind of set up the clip?
Sure. I mean, I totally agree with Jim. Just to underline that, like, we filmmakers we pour so much blood, sweat, and tears into every frame of our films. We care about every cut. Why would we ever want to have an experience where a whole group of people are watching our film and they're seeing it, experiencing it in a way that we have not put that same kind of love and care into it? So when we were working on Crip Camp, one of the things that was really important to us was to do test screenings for folks in the disability community, and Jim was really proactive very early on in the process and saying, like, let's put line items in our budget to make sure that we actually are audio describing and captioning versions of rough cuts, so we can have rough cut screenings that are accessible. And so we did send out for a quick audio description version for a rough cut screening for a group of folks, diverse folks from the disability community in Berkeley, and we wanted to show you a little clip of what happened when we did that. So this is not our final audio description.
No, and we did not have the opportunity to check it before we played it. So see if you can see where there could be some concerns here.
Inside job. Okay, go.
This is not the Denise clip. This is the other clip.
Yeah, this is the. I don't want to use the word because it's not the Denise clip.
With help, campers play with soccer balls, crawling and shimmying across the grass. Lionel.
At the camp, you could do anything that you thought you wanted to try to do. You wouldn't be picked to be on the team back home. But at Jeanette, you had to go up to bat.
Counselors help baseball players in wheelchairs.
And if you didn't hit the ball, hell, you were out.
Young Lionel runs, pushing a wheelchair-bound player, Jim.
Lionel was really committed to us and making sure that we really had a good summer. So.
That's Michelle Spitz's work.
No, it's not. God bless Michelle.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
This was.
What happened when you did this rough cut screening with that?
Well, when that section played, there was a gasp from the room because the words that they used for somebody using a wheelchair was wheelchair bound, and that is an offensive term in the disabled community. I am not bound by my wheelchair. I don't sleep in my wheelchair. I am not entrapped in my wheelchair. My wheelchair is my freedom machine. And so, so needless to say that happened a couple of times. And, but this whole experience also was really enlightening to us. The feedback we got from the disabled community, about our film and the rough cut was really, really essential for all sorts of things.
Can I ask you about that? And we'll talk more with the whole group about the journey. And I so appreciate, you all and Rodney and Aaron and Michelle, that perfection. You didn't, as you said, you didn't get it right the first time. Did you write that captioning, or it kind of got done? You did it for the rough cut. You put it up because you were trying to get some feedback. Just out of curiosity, just how did that happen? I just want to touch on that before we go to the next clip where you really got it right.
Well, and I mean, indeed, this was literally, we got it turned around very, very quickly. But that after that, Nicole and I went over not just the captioning script, but also the audio description script. And it was a long spreadsheet. And we were able to make comments and make changes and such in that. And So it was a fair amount of back and forth, but it yielded something that blind and visually impaired people tell us they really like.
There were so many things in there, you know, from the kind of like little tiny subtle artistic choices that we were able to influence by going through the transcript and actually working on it for the final version, to things like what Jim, you know, just showed, which is like was this huge gaffe. But we thought it would be instructive because I think there are a lot of people who literally don't ever look at those things and just assume that they're okay. And so, you know, for us, it was like people in the community who watched the screening had ideas about like what would be the best language for certain things and things like that. So it's also just kind of like, I think, really thinking about making sure that you are, you know, not only looking at it yourself, but also engaging in dialogue with people who are going to be using that as a means to fully experience the film.
Right. Which is really a perfect, let's bring everybody else. Let's save the Denise clip, because I think actually you rightly nailed, and we're getting some amazing questions in the chat. But yeah, Tim, go ahead and bring everybody else up with us.
I mean, before we play the Denise clip, it's really an example of how we approached captioning voices of people that were hard to understand. And we can certainly jump into that, or if you want to hold that.
We've gotten some really interesting questions. I kind of want to hold it because I think it's such an interesting also discussion of representation and expansion of audience and kind of transformation, particularly of the people you've been working with. So let's have everybody join. We have Michelle and Aaron too. Michelle and Aaron and all, I think we just said a little bit. We've shown a little bit of the amazing work, creative work that you all have done. Can you, and Michelle, I would start with you on this piece. Can you actually speak to really what Rodney and Jim and Nicole all just queued up, which is there's a journey that they're going on as filmmakers, and that this process of audio description, we have some really interesting technical questions coming in, but the expansiveness of it creatively as craft and also out toward audience and reach. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, most certainly. I did not work on Jim's film. I'd like to say that I did, but I did not. And Netflix does some wonderful work, and they did a great job on Jim's film. I actually have worked on other projects, and I work one-on-one with my clients, and I give grants for audio description. So I have the luxury of working with them from the onset. And again, to reiterate what Aaron was speaking about, going through the script, making the changes that are necessary, adapting to what it is that their goal is, and then teaching them along the way what it means to continue to use this asset as they go through distribution. But one thing I'd like to point out is that it is true that many of us don't have that opportunity up front to work on a film in its process. It's usually after the fact, it gets distributed, it's going to some sort of a different entity as far as distribution is concerned, and then the asset will be created there. And of course, you certainly could ask for a copy of the script during that process and ask to listen to some of it, I think, depending on who you're working with. But I would say that, and my recommendation would be to everybody, if you can find it in your budget to create the audio description and the captioning in the process of making your film, and then send that off on its journey to film festivals and to distribution, be sure it's attached through that journey, you are far better off in terms of being sort of guaranteed, hopefully, that it will go. And part of the work that I do in the advocacy is following that media, being sure it's labeled, it's promoted, it's advertised, it's talked about, and we are creating outreach so that the end user knows that it exists. But this is a lot of work. It's almost a little bit like project management. Not everybody has the opportunity or the time to do that. But the idea of working with each client is to educate them on how to do this, and then to tell their fellow filmmakers and their colleagues as well.
And
so it does take a lot of different things.
I'm going to interrupt you because you've actually nailed a question that's just come up for you. Really, I mean, others may be able to answer here too, but I can tell we have some producers, filmmakers. What's a budget, folks? Let's get some numbers here. What should people be budgeting for this? For what elements? The elements that you described.
Okay, there is a range here, and because there's so much content now, and there's so much competition with the post-production companies doing this work, I sort of hesitate to refer to it in specifics, but I would say anywhere from $20 a minute, $25 per program minute and upward, depending upon who you're working with. And some other entities are lower than that, depending on what their profiles and what they want to do with their business. And the captioning, again, I would safely say, this is just me personally, if someone budgeted for maybe $4,000, $4,500 for captioning and audio description, and maybe someone who's overseeing part of this as project management to be sure it goes to where it needs to go, might be a relatively safe number. But again, it varies very much from company to company. So I can't specifically. Aaron, you might be able to speak to that.
I think, yeah, and Aaron, Rodney, anybody can jump in. And there's another question for Aaron. I think the key thing I've heard you all say, which is it's time, it's labor, it's creative labor, it's all of you, right? And then it's the actual, as you're saying, per minute cost. I mean, Rodney, Jim, or Nicole, do you want to jump in just on that, making it possible, that money, the sort of resources and money question?
Yeah, can I just say one thing that I think if you have to think about audio description not as like a textbook, but as like a beautiful novel.
Yeah.
And if you really kind of approach it that way, that it's not totally just functional, but that the art involved with it is really, really important. That's going to be a real guiding light for you as you think about this.
Right.
I can't speak to exactly what the costs were involved with us because Netflix was paying for ours, but it did take time on our part to be able to review and vet and put some back and forth.
Jim, that's why I call you an auteur director. Like money is it's beneath you. It's really. Sorry.
We're going to be this lucky again.
I don't have those luxuries, and I will say that what Michelle said is around the price point, like $20 per minute, and that included, that was sort of like a flat fee, and it was what I could afford. And my film was under $300,000 documentary, and I can just be very real about that. And it cost $17,000 for 2.5 years until the Ford Foundation stepped in and gave us the bulk of the money so that I could go to Berlin and do this huge shoot. But until then, it was a tiny movie. And I still would have found the resources to do the audio description because it is that important to me. And I just feel like if you're going to do a film that centers on blind and low vision characters, and this is the way that the blind and low vision community is going to be accessing your film, it just becomes an integral part of the process. And I do feel like, I keep saying that just like underemployed poets should be audio describers because I do think it is like poetry. Really.
Poetry. I think that is if there's anything that this group, and many of us have spoken and we've worked with this before, and there are many other artists. You are not alone as artists. I can think of so many from Sasha Purcell, I also know Daniel, Christine. There's so many artists who are really working incredibly creatively with the range of craft that you all have touched on. And before we go back to maybe another clip and Denise and that sort of advocacy point that Michelle is making, Aaron, a beautiful question has come for you, a generous question of what do you really love to hear? And can you say more about the kind of interaction, the feedback, the filmmaker? What is helpful for you, Aaron, in your work as the poet that you are?
Well, I think it's awfully kind of you to call me a poet. I'm incredibly touched by that. When I train audio describers, I talk about how it's like poetry and how it's also like being the piccolo in the symphony, But I think that, so every one of us, when we watch a piece of media, we see certain things, and it's never going to be what you see is not going to be what I see. And so to work with a filmmaker who can tell you in this scene, I wanted to X, right, gives you the ability to write that in such a way that X comes to the fore, right? I may have been totally focused on Z, because that's where that's my lens. So having someone like Rodney not only work with me on the first draft and on the second draft, but also being in studio where we could talk about pacing and vocal tone, coloring, how movement is perceived and what he wanted people to see in that movement. So I can write it from my point of view, but I'm not the filmmaker. I'm an audience member. So I'm going to share it from my lens. But if I can talk to the filmmaker and hear what their lens is, then I can try and translate that through my words.
Rodney, thank you, Aaron. Rodney, did you and Aaron do that together, or what is it? Give us a little bit nitty gritty on that.
It was just she really wrote it. I mean, there were just words that I would maybe offer alternate suggestions, or it was just smaller vocabulary kind of things that for me would evoke the image, but she would come up with incredibly evocative things that I would have never come up with for very abstract imagery, that is really hard to put into language and is intentionally abstract because it's meant to put you in the subjective space of someone with low vision, right? And so she was really bringing that to life. And I guess the other thing that I would say is that it really is important to sort of follow it through to the end because, it does go through a sound edit. And I remember watching the first sound edit and just thinking this is just not falling the way that it should be falling. And having a conversation with Tom and just being like, can you do another pass of the sound edit on the audio description? Because I feel like it's just not, the rhythm just feels off to me. Mm-hmm. And so that's just another level of collaboration where he was like, yes, I can definitely do that. I didn't spend a ton of time on it. Let me go back in and see what I can do, So it's also just voicing your concerns about things that you're going to be the one to have to live with. If it's troubling you in studio, then you have the capacity to say something about it as a filmmaker and should, right? So
we have about a little more than 15 minutes left, and I think that actually the last point you've said, which everybody here has emphasized, Michelle as well, which is really kind of keep going, right? Keep going on the journey. I want to lift up question number 2 and ask the Crip Camp team to answer it by telling a story that is a joint story of all of ours. But question number 2, should all films employ caption and audio description and have these different versions available? And I think I'm just going to take moderator's privilege and say the answer for this group is yes, absolutely. And but here, note that we've already heard from these teams that it can take time, and maybe we don't get it right on the first time, or we take some effort before we get to it. And so, can you talk a little bit about Crip Camp team about closed caption and audio captioning and open captioning, and your experience with that, and how the decisions that you made over time with the release of Crip Camp?
Yeah. This has been, even though access was critically important to us, and we wanted to treat both the captioning and the audio description artistically, and we worked really hard to do that. We are all on a learning journey, and we arrived at Sundance knowing that there were going to be closed captioning devices for the premiere week of our film. And having closed caption versions available. And we had an experience right before a panel that Brenda moderated in Salt Lake City, where the captioning devices were not working. It may have been cell phone interference. Nobody's really sure what happened, but the closed captioning devices went down. And we did not have an open caption version to play. And a really brilliant activist who was going to be on the panel from the deaf community in Salt Lake City, Chandra Benito, came to us and said, did you really think that we want to watch the film on these crappy captioning devices? And it really made an enormous impression on us. I don't know if you want to pick up from there, Jim.
Well, I'm only going to say one thing. It wasn't a panel. It was like 1,200 people. It was the second major screening. It was a huge audience.
Yeah.
You know, you handled it with incredible grace. We were mortified at Sundance Film Festival that we hadn't been able to give you exactly what every festival artist should have, and we all, you know, kept going forward. But it was hard for us and for you all too. I know you really moved fast after that.
Well, we were able to pivot, and within 24 hours, Netflix is able to turn around an open caption version, and the subsequent screenings that we had were open captioned. And yeah, I mean, Nicole said, look, we learned a lot in this. We've learned for years on this film about how to do things better. And that was one of those things that we thought these little captioning boxes were fine. And she simply says, would you want to watch a film like this all the time? And in providing the opportunity to show things open caption, and when you let the deaf and hard of hearing community know, you will get an audience. You will get an audience of people who are reticent maybe to go to the theater, but they will come out to your screens.
Right. And that actually brings us to question 4. And I think Michelle, Nicole, come to that. And let's bring up question 4. And I'm going to go to Michelle. But Nicole, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say that the screening that we had, the first screening we had at Sundance after that incident, which was open captioned, was for me the most joyous screening we had at the festival, because we were watching it together with people who had that experience of being, you know, not being able to see it, and then being able to see it and being able to see it with them. I just want to cop to the fact that I didn't realize how transformational that was going to be for me, to have that emotional experience of having something that we worked so hard on suddenly open to a group of people like that. And you know, it was like overnight I went from thinking like, oh, maybe we could have one screening at the next festival that's open caption, to being like, no, let's do every screening open caption, of course, you know. So I just hope that that's the direction that we're headed in. There's really no reason not to do that.
Right. And Michelle, there's, you know, some technical questions have come in, but I think they really speak to your work as an advocate and a consultant of the many different kinds of tools people can have. So for example, community screenings, can you speak to technically, but also again, the range of possibilities here from this audience question?
I think we're in the middle of that journey. We're not where we need to be yet. So for example, there will be certain settings that can accommodate digital cinema packages. There will be certain settings that can accommodate Blu-rays, and also the headsets and or captioning bars or open captions or open audio description. It depends on how you've chosen to screen these films. But eventually, I think there will be a lot more of it than not. But as we know, all movie theaters are mandated now to have headsets for the audio description and captioning bars for the captions. And the other thing is, of course, there are apps now that are being used. ActiView is an app that's now been bought by Spectrum, and that app will be used for using your phone to sync with some of the description. One thing I just wanted to point out really quickly, because I know we have very little time, I would encourage people to look at it in this way. Many people are considering their films in multiple languages and distribution in multiple countries, so on and so forth. And my response is that every area has its own innate language. And the first language we should be thinking about is the language of the hard of hearing and deaf and the low vision and blind. And we should be accommodating those assets automatically. And other countries can do the same. So it's really very important. And the last thing is, a lot of the films that are subtitled, for example, I worked on Pavarotti, often we're hiring other talent to read the subtitles. And that's audio described from a different voice, and then narration from another voiceover, and so on and so forth. So there's many things to consider, and your SAP channels on your television are there. Your streaming has it now, primarily a lot more than we did before. So it's there. It's a lot more there than it's ever been before.
And I think what you've said is none of us are free until all of us are free. That is what I heard you saying that, and I think we do have time, so I would love to play our fourth clip. And there's questions coming in about the use of artificial intelligence and kind of automating these processes meant to save time. And we are lovers of craft here, and we have poets, so we're going to come back to that question. And some of us have a lot of feelings about AI, and we can work those out together. But before we do that, and maybe this speaks actually in a way we can show and not tell. Can you set this clip up for us? And the reason I really want to take it is to take us past just ourselves and really think about who else is with us as documentarians, the community to whom we are accountable, to whom are we accountable, and to what is the purpose and to whose benefit are the stories that we're putting out into the world. So can you talk about what we're about to see, and then we'll talk about Denise after. So what are we going to watch?
We had captioning for people whose voices we were having a hard time to understand, but we wanted to take the same kind of sense of artistic intent and art to what we were doing there.
All right, let's play that clip then, Jose, when you're ready. Okay.
You were just a kid. We went to Janet, that is Janet. I am. What we decided to get married. About that. I understand why you say a handicap feel. But why keep my photo? Oh my God!
I love the off screen so much, Jim. So that's Denise and Neil Jacobson, and Denise has been with you in many of your screenings. Let's talk about what that's meant and what's happened as a result.
Well, the artistic treatment of the captions and titles for Denise and her husband Neil and Steve Hoffman, who are the three people that we titled in the film, were really like the design came out of a desire to highlight the poetic use of language, and also their incredible comedic timing, which all three of them had, and also a desire to have the titles heighten our sense of who they are as people and not detract. And so we gave that challenge to Lauren Schwartzman, who is our incredible associate producer and is also a graphic genius on top of it. And she came back with 3 or 4 just gorgeous treatments that were literally inspired by how she heard Denise in particular speaking, and the way that the language choices really kind of like fall on the screen like beat poetry, and the fact that they're placed where we want people to look, placed exactly where we want people to be looking in the scene, and the fact that they're not giving away her punchlines before they happen, which with a standard subtitle treatment was happening, and it was really detracting. It all kind of like the minute we saw it, we all were like, oh my God, we have to do all the titles like that. And we worked with Netflix to make sure we could do that.
So, and can we bring everybody up? And I think also question number 5. We have about 5 more minutes left. I'm getting a little audio feedback. Sorry, guys. But the 5th question is a beautiful question about the relationship between human and machine. And of course, these are human programmed machines, AI, right? The increasing use of automation in this space, but it gives us the possibility to do it for large projects, and that's amazing. But what you all have described is something much more interactive and much more part of the craft. So, Erin, I don't know if you want to speak to that balance.
Well, I mean, I think that AI voices are hard to listen to. I think they don't communicate the full spectrum of human emotion in the way that a voice like Michelle's does. I think that, it's true, right? So, I mean, you want it to be pleasant to listen to as well as informative. Also, I mean, I could go on about this for a really long time, and I don't want to do that because I know everybody else needs to talk. But when I start to write description, I watch the movie with my back turned towards the screen. I listen for what the filmmaker has given me in terms of audio cues. I don't want to over describe and I don't want to under describe, and I just don't think that a machine can do that. So there's both sides of that coin, the writing and the voicing. I don't know. I mean, I'm biased, but
I'm
biased too.
Yes, I think this is a panel together, united in our solidarity and bias for craft, creativity, art, and human imagination and sentient being imagination, even non-sentient being imagination. Directors, you want to say anything to that point, while keeping in mind that we do really, need to, we do want to be sensitive to try and making things possible. So we work with sometimes what we have, but
I guess for me, I am interested in the personal and the idiosyncratic and the unique and the poetic, and that's why I relish working with someone like Erin, and I do feel like the power of the emotional tone of her voice just registers on a level that I don't think that you can get from AI. And so, I don't know, I question all of those decisions on a craft level, on an emotional level, how, what's it gonna get right, even in captioning. I just see so many horrendous mistakes in captioning. I got like a captioned trailer for like something that's specifically going out to the disability community today, and it was literally like misattributed. Like they attributed a quote that John Dugdale says in the trailer to me, and I was like, I don't say that, and he's on screen, and it's really clear that he's on screen, and I know that you don't have time to change this, but like, I can't see something and not say
right,
that's wrong, And they were like, "We're gonna fix it." Like, deadline, schmedline.
Right. On that note, actually, Maggie, I don't know, Maggie, if you can come up, but we had a technical glitch here, and we're gonna fix it now together. We're gonna address it. I'm so used to this now. I feel so comfortable. Maggie, come on in and wrap us up, and let's do this together.
Thank you all so much for joining today, and can't we...
Interpreters, thank you, especially to our interpreter.
Thank you so much to Hope and Andrea, and to Recapped for the captioning.